Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so glad you're with us today. I've spoken here often about my process of researching the afterlife and the greater reality over decades, a total of 5 decades. Eventually, there came a time, and I guess it was maybe 15 years ago, when I had learned, I think, maybe 95, 96% of what I ever was going to learn, and I had a pretty detailed picture of a gigantic reality, and it all fit together, and it made sense. And soon thereafter, I wrote The Fun of Dying and began what I think of as the teaching phase of my life. I thought there wasn't much new under the sun, actually. But then 2 years ago, I discovered that there really was something new, and this is a lot of fun. I had a pretty confirmed opinion about both mainstream science and mainstream Christianity, especially Catholicism, as set in their dogma-driven ways and really not caring about any of the amazing things that we were learning about the greater reality. And then along came Father Nathan Castle. Nathan has been a Dominican priest for more than 4 decades. He lives and works in a community of Dominican men and women serving the University of Arizona in Tucson. So it's hard to imagine anyone who is a more traditional Catholic than our dear Father Nathan. However, he's a gentle and very spiritual man, and just over 20 years ago, he was recruited by elevated beings. We're not in bodies, we know all about them, to do spiritual rescue work. Imagine that. One of the many things I've learned because of my friendship with the wonderful Mikey and Carol Morgan is that close to 25%, and he says maybe even a hair more than 25% of those who die will go off track for a time. And we know from many hundreds of completed deaths that there is a very uniform post-death process. It's, by the way, just parenthetically, it's nothing like the tunnel and light and all the various things that happen in near-death experiences. They have nothing to do with actual death. They can turn into death if the experiencer chooses, but they aren't part of the normal death process. However, even though there's a very uniform process, if you leave at a planned exit point, there are people, as we know, who leave in accidents, they leave by murder, they leave in all kinds of suicide ways that were not planned, and it's not an exit point. And some people leave because they're, distressed, they feel bad, and they don't feel as if they really are presentable for God, I guess, is the best way to put it. So even people who had died at a normal exit point can go off track. A lot of people go off track. Most of them are rescued pretty quickly. But the rescuing is the hard part. Otherwise, until people are rescued, they're in a kind of limbo, and we'll talk about that today. Before I met Father Nathan Castle, I knew a lot about spirit rescue work. I even had experimented with learning how to do it under the tutelage of the late, great rescue expert, Bruce Moen. Bruce was one of the first explorers who worked with Bob Monroe of the Monroe Institute. And the Monroe Institute, I can't say enough good things about. They're wonderful. But Bob Monroe had taught Bruce how to do rescue work, and he was still doing it just before he died. And I took a course with him, and I rescued a very, very old lady because she actually had died in the 18th century. But that's another story. I knew rescue work, but I had no idea that a priest could do it. And then along came our wonderful friend, Father Nathan. In 2019, I read his first book. It's called Afterlife Interrupted, Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over, and I was astounded and thrilled and delighted by it. It's completely consistent with what I'd learned in doing decades of afterlife research. And frankly, I wish I had known him long before. There have been now, this is our 3rd time talking. I think there was a second, I can't even remember what we talked about the second time, but it's in the archive. But there now is a new book called Afterlife Interrupted, Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over, only the stuck part is crossed out. We'll ask Father Nathan about that. This is his 3rd appearance with us on Seek Reality, and I'm so happy to say that in this second book actually is even better perhaps than the first, because I learned more from it. The first I was just plain astounded by. So let's find out what's going on in Father Nathan's life. Welcome, Nathan. I'm so glad to have you back with us.
Well, it's great to be with you, and I'm going to interview you before we're over with. I want to hear what you what you enjoyed about book 2. But thanks for having me on. Like so many people, the pandemic, shut down my normal life a little more than a year ago, coming on a year and a month. And much of the work that I was doing involved travel and giving talks before different audiences. But then, that shut down with the pandemic. So
for everybody it did, yes.
Yeah. So what it did is provide me with a lot more leisure and nowhere to go. So I had lots and lots of notes of crossings. I do about one a week, and only 13 were in that first book. So it gave me the opportunity to get started on the next book. This one came out in late November.
Right. Yeah. And are you going to keep, there's no reason you would stop this, right? This is something that your superiors are comfortable with, everybody is happy with, and because you're really doing God's work, quite literally.
I've been very pleased. I had reticence about, I'm a lifelong Catholic, and I knew very well that this could be upsetting to some folk, and it has been, but only around the edges. And my main obedience inside the church, I'm a Dominican, and so I have a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and my obedience is formally paid to my provincial in the Western United States. And we elect our leaders, and one was going out of office. He approved of the first book. A new one came in and approved of the second book.
I love it.
So it's the work is peculiar, but we also in the Catholic tradition have a long mystical tradition.
Yes.
Going really all the way back to the resurrection and even before that. So uncommon phenomenological things is part of the tradition, and I've just tried to be faithful to what my experiences are and record them, share them.
I was a Protestant for 25 years, and then I was a Catholic for 25 years by marriage, but very serious about it. So I have come to believe that actually Catholicism and the Catholic, clergy are more open to this sort of thing than our Protestants, because the Protestants are very dogma-driven, whereas the Catholics sort of seem, the Virgin shows up at Lourdes and everyone says, great, there she is. It's not a big deal, whereas anything supernatural seems to be creepy to the Protestants. So, good for you. You're with the winning team, and I just love the work you're doing. It's wonderful.
I love the work too, and it's not as though it's the only thing I do. I'm a priest, and I say masses and hear confessions and bury the dead and stuff. I do lots of. I'm teaching a couple of online scripture studies, but this work has not been sanctioned. I'm able to do what I need to do.
This is great. Well, what I'd like to do is something which I don't think we did as much last time, because I was so fascinated with the stories. And I'm fascinated with these stories too. There are some we want to get to. But first, I'd like to just sort of talk about the process. You call this an interrupted death experience. That would tell the people what that means to you, what those words mean to you.
Yeah, I did that on purpose because many people are familiar with the phrase near-death experience.
Right.
Going all the way back to Raymond Moody and Life After Life in the mid-'70s.
Right.
And IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, has popularized the notion and organized groups that are a little bit like an AA group, something local, where anybody can walk in the door and is welcome to tell their story and so on. So I wanted what I do to find a home next to the near-death experience, because I thought that was something that had entered into common parlance. So,
which is great, and I think it's a very suitable, set of words to describe what actually happens, which is important. I had Raymond as a guest once, and he, in fact, maybe twice. Because there is some confusion among the public about, is this really how death is? You're going to see a tunnel and light. No, death is a totally different thing. And I said to Raymond, aren't people confused by it? He said they shouldn't be. I knew it was not real death, and that was not, because that's why I called it, a near-death experience. So he was very clear on the fact that it wasn't actual death. This is not actual death quite either. However, you don't come back. You do the first part, which is leaving the body, but then you don't do the second part, which is going to where the dead are. It's a very interesting phenomenon. And when I first found out it could be 25% or more of the people who die, I realized we really had to do something about this. What you're doing is so important. But talk about the process, because it's interesting. I mean, they found you to do this work. This is not something you thought, it seems to me, based on the stories.
Yes, correct. And in the first of the two Afterlife Interrupted books, I spend some time at the beginning introducing myself and how it all started. But the simple explanation is I've been taught to pray without ceasing. St. Paul said to pray without ceasing, and I was taught as a little boy how to pray before going to sleep and to consecrate my sleep so that God talked to me in the night. Like St. Joseph having all these dreams about take the baby and go into Egypt and so on. There's a rich tradition of dream communication in the Jewish and Christian scriptures. Right. And then I entered into the Dominican order. We're semi-contemplative, and the last prayer of the night is called Compline, which is from the word complete, and the idea that when the day is done and when you're about to go unconscious, you surrender your consciousness into the hands of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And say, essentially, I'm yours morning, noon, and night. I'm not going to need my consciousness for the next 8 hours, so would you hang on to it for me?
Yeah, enjoy, yes.
Oh, yeah, play with it if you want. And so it happened that about 22 years ago, I had my first of my night visitors where someone came in a dream and presented a violent, awful death. I knew right away it wasn't my dream material. I woke up from it. I wrote it down. I found a prayer partner the next morning, and we discovered that it was a soul who had died some years earlier and who needed some help.
Now, you have these prayer partners. They always are working with you. And the sense I get is because then that allows you to have one or the other of you channel this person who then can talk to you or to your prayer partner. Explain that a little bit.
Well, in fact, I was just doing that just within the last hour. That's had to be done on Zoom because I haven't been able to be with other people very much.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's just fine, on technology. I go in. First of all, we do a very concentrated protective prayer. I say to people where spirit activities are concerned, it's not safe to pick up hitchhikers on this plane or on any other plane I know of. And before moving into spiritual realms, it's important to call on. I use Michael the Archangel, who's common across a lot of different cosmologies and religious systems.
Right.
Mary, Mother of Jesus, is a friend of mine. I always include her, and St. Dominic, who's the founder of the order I'm in, and a bunch of others. And I include my own parents who passed. And anyways, the angels, my guardian. I surround myself and my partner with a kind of a holy huddle, if you will. Imagine yourself encircled by light and goodness and truth, and people who would, have your back and do what they could to prevent any interference. And then I read the story that I wrote down. I write these stories down as I receive them, so they often come.
This is the dream, then. You read the dream as part of the start of the process.
Yes, I do. First, I use a little app on my phone that records. So I have a recording of the session. And I specifically don't use the word channel, even though I think it's a benign word, but in my religious community, it has overtones of darkness that so I just say I'm allowing my voice to be used.
Yes, I see that. Yes, that's what you say in the book, right?
And I'm a Dominican, and we're the order of preachers, and so preaching is a largely vocal activity. So my body was consecrated to, I laid on the floor of St. Albert's Priory in Oakland many years ago, gave my whole life over to the preaching project. And so allowing my voice to be borrowed for a little while, I don't think is inconsistent with my whole life.
Of course. Of course, of course. But that makes this a very efficient process, because one of you is actually talking to the other. But the other's voice is being used by someone who is not in body and who basically has summoned you. Help me, I guess, is what they're saying, although they don't use those words.
And even summoning, I'm not commanded to do anything against my will.
Right.
I'm not unconscious. I'm not in any kind of a state where I'm unaware of what's happening. I'm free to stop. And sometimes things interrupt. Someone comes to the door, and in the middle of it, I have to get up and answer the door.
Yeah. But when your voice is being used, you're aware of what's being said, right? It's not you don't have to go into trance or something. Okay, this is just easy.
They borrow my vocabulary too, and sometimes you'll hear them say, some of them are people that died in their teens or whatnot, and I have a very big vocabulary. It was an interest of mine as a child. I was into spelling bees and etymologies and stuff. So language and words has always been a love of mine. So I use a lot of words that other people might not use or don't know the meaning of it. So sometimes they'll say, I've never used that word before, but it's available to me.
And then there was someone in this book, I think it may have been the fellow who was a Muslim, who said, I don't even speak English. But I seem to be able to speak English now because he was using your voice. Yeah, fun, very much fun to even read this stuff is a lot of fun, because everyone, I assure you, this is all absolutely accurate. This is true. I'm very skeptical by nature of anything new, and I have to say this is a natural continuation of the sorts of things that they have been doing at the Monroe Institute and in other places, and there's certainly a desperate need for it. Some of these people have been dead for a while, though, haven't they?
Yes, most of the ones that I deal with have died in the last century, or even in the last 60 years, maybe. I'm 65 now.
Yeah.
So most of them are people that have died either while I've been alive or not too much earlier than that. But once in a while, you'll get people that go back even longer than that.
So it seems from reading your books that these people have had a very active sort of process during this time, and they're outside of time. There is no time where they are, although they seem to, be enough aware of what's going on that they have a sense of process. But they'll gather in groups of people who died in similar ways. I mean, everybody, a bunch of people who fell, some people who committed suicide will group together. Mm-hmm. Doesn't it fascinate you to sort of better understand what they've been up to during this time, and as they've gotten their act together and felt ready to go on?
Yes, and because you've read the books, that they often will tell us in quite a lot of detail about what they remember as they left the body and where they went and so on. But one of the commonalities is some sort of afterlife healthcare continuum.
Explain that. Healthcare.
Well, think of all the many ways that you and I and your listeners access healthcare.
Yes.
I just qualified for Medicare, so I just had to go through a bunch of different things that they require.
Yes.
And so there's, some things are emergency, others, your needs might be multiple or they might be simple. Anyway, people end up landing somewhere after they're out of body where whatever it is they need is provided them. And
yes.
A lot of them go unconscious at the time of their physical death and the leaving of the body, and they can't tell you, just as though, people who are in traffic accidents today will have a lot of things will have happened after their accident that they have no recall of.
Yes. Yeah.
They might even be told that they were talking in the ambulance and have no idea.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever happened.
Right,
so states of consciousness at the moment of trauma or at subsequent to trauma can vary. But the people that I deal with all did leave their bodies and were not able to go back in. Their bodies couldn't accommodate them any longer. So they physically went through at least that part of death. They left the body. But then after that, they land in something like intensive care. Sometimes they move through the continuum, like from intensive care into something, not really surgery, but somewhere where they're triaged and then they're moved to a place, and then maybe after that they heal to a point where they can go to something like a private room. And I feel like my partners and I are the discharge staff.
Yes, that's right. It's true. That's actually the way it is.
Yeah.
They're ready now to go to the next stage of life. One of the most striking things about your books and about everything else I have learned is that there's no judgment. Nobody, they killed themselves. They did their, I remember Dwight, I still even remember his name from the first book, who was appalled at the way he had died because it was, sadomasochistic sex or something, and he died that way. And you know, I mean, how can you appear before God when you have done that? And that's how you died. No judgment of the poor man who came to help him. Everyone can say it together. Jesus himself came to help Dwight, because Dwight needed big help. He got big help. I mean, that to me is one of the most beautiful stories I've ever read. Yeah, beautiful.
And Jesus came to Dwight as something like a hospital chaplain.
Yes.
Who didn't come in with charts and metrics of any kind. Just came in like a nice visitor and didn't stay too long and said, "I'll be back again to visit again." And eventually he said, "Did you ever see a crucifix?" And he said, "Well, I was that guy." And that
I love it.
And Dwight had died naked.
Yeah.
And shamed by his murderer. And Jesus said, "Did you know that there wasn't a loincloth that day?"
No.
All of me was on display along a public street, and my mom and her friends were there. And and they put the poor Dwight had died of having sharp metal things pushed into his lungs.
Oh, God.
And Jesus said, they put sharp metal in me too. But here we are.
Isn't that an extraordinary story? I mean, but that is perfectly typical of what Jesus was, who Jesus is, and typical of the truth of life after death, because there is no judgment there. Jesus even says it right in the Gospels. He says God doesn't judge anybody. He says it right in the Gospels, and it's so true. And that's the beautiful thing about what you do in showing a little bit of the process with these people, and they tell their stories. The stories are all so respectful of them. Yeah. They're being treated with such love, with such kindness, with such deference, with such protectiveness. No, if you want to be reassured that there's no way you can divorce yourself from the love of God, read these books, because over and over there are people who are sure they have, and they haven't. God is right there to love them, and if you need big help, Jesus will show up. Great.
And people are aware that they feel I owe a debt to someone.
Yes.
They often bring it up and are told that's noble. It's just not timely yet. We'll let you know when it's time to, seek out that person that you harmed. Or
yes.
Like some people have been the driver of a multi-fatality accident.
Yes, I remember him. Yep.
I'm sorry, but that very often. I'm only dealing with this one little subset. I'm not giving a guided tour of the afterlife. I'm just dealing with the ones that come to me, and they're people that went through trauma at the end.
Yes.
And need this specific help. But very often they're ready to make amends and are told, well, that's part of what this process is about. We're going to get you onto the next level, and then the resources that you'll need to assist with that will be available.
Oh, my word, that's so beautiful. It really is. The love and care that exists for each of us, the preciousness and with which each of us is held by God and by God's minions is just beyond anything anyone can imagine. Because our religions basically teach us we're sinful. I don't think God sees that sin. God sees just only love. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's talk a little bit about then. They come to you, and what seems to be consistent is that ready. One of the person says sort of ready, but they're ready-ish to move on. How do they know they're ready? What is there? You watch them grow, so you get their stories of growth. What is it that makes them decide they're ready to try the next stage?
Well, remember, I only meet them when they show up in a dream.
Right.
They've already been vetted that they are ready, even if they're fully convinced of it. There are a lot of things like that in life where some people are very risk averse, and they're not going to do a thing until a process is way down the line that they're absolutely sure they can do it. Others will just sort of jump in and try. And there's that same element is in here. There's some like minimal threshold that needs to be met, but then once they're there, some take to it, like a fish to water, and others just move through it a little more slowly or cautiously.
Takes more time.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things, everyone, just to make sure that you understand, and you're sort of with our program here. Why do some people they can't go back to their bodies? This isn't a near-death experience. This is they fell out of a tree, whatever. The body is sufficiently damaged. But the thing that makes death irrevocable is that the silver cord breaks. Now, the silver cord is an energy cord that attaches our body to who we really are, the eternal being that we truly are. And the words silver cord come from the Bible. There are instances in the Bible where people have seen the silver cord. But this is why people can go back after near-death experience. They've been floating around having a great time in the astral plane, but they have not gone to where the dead are. If you go to where the dead are, you don't come back out again. Mm-hmm. So once these people the silver cord has broken, they, for whatever reason, the body, usually because the body's totally not viable, they are still alive. You can't kill yourself. But this is why suicide is so counterproductive, because no matter what you do, you can't kill your mind. I mean, your soul is eternal, truly eternal.
Yeah.
But then they tend to congregate. They tend to. There was one lovely situation where someone really was afraid to leave the death scene, didn't want to go anywhere else, just wanted the peace of the death scene, and so the beings helping him or her, I can't remember, I think it was a man, said, we can move this same exact scene to the next level, and then you'll be more comfortable there, something like that.
Yeah, I think you're talking about another one of the people that died in a fall. I think that's Derek.
Maybe, yeah. I don't remember their names, and I tend not to take notes because I sort of figure, you know who the people are, and if I can remember the bits, then that's probably all I need to do. But did most of them do that? They move to a place which is at the next level, but it's still not where the afterlife is, and they're tended there, rather than staying in the same field or the same building where they died?
I haven't. That was Daniel. I called him Daniel.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Who was ready enough? That's chapter.
Yes, that's. I remember. Him.
He said, I guess I'm at least ready enough. So I said, okay, we can work with it. He did stay in the field. He was on an outing with his fraternity. He was a junior in college,
right?
And in a fall in a athletic contest, and and he just was so horrified at all of it that he wanted it to all go away, and he let it leave him, and he just stayed in the field where everybody else went to the hospital or to the police or to the morgue or back to campus.
Yeah,
he just
right.
And then eventually his guardian said, you don't need to sit here and do this. We can move this to the next plane.
Yes. And they did that, right? I mean,
that helped him for a while until he really didn't need that any longer.
Yeah. No, this is a very life-affirming, both books are very life-affirming in that human life really is eternal. This is not just a slogan. It's impossible for your mind to die. And after death, I mean, there are occasions where unconscious, like when you're sleeping, as Father Nathan, was talking about sleeping and dreaming and stuff, your mind is doing other things and you think you're sort of unconscious. After death, usually there's a period of sleep if it's a normal death. After that, you just don't ever even sleep again. You're not ever unconscious. And I think that's a very important and powerful thing for people to take from these books. These people have, in some cases, complicated their lives by dying in this whatever awkward way it was that put them off track for a time. But it's just like in life, let's say you had a bad day, you got to deal with some things. your life just goes on. Isn't it beautiful that your life goes on and there's always help and there's always love?
Yes. And there's the opportunity to start over for people for whom this life didn't go well.
Right.
I try to stay very close. My undergraduate training was in sociology, and in the social sciences, you're supposed to be observers of events and then reporters of what you observed.
Yes.
That's kind of the methodology of the social sciences. And so I try to just relate to my reader what I experienced. And then I try not to extrapolate a lot. I just try to just put the data out there. And so in IONS and on podcasts like your own and circulating it among people interested in consciousness studies and near death and death and afterlife, we have so many different cosmologies and understandings of what comes next. And even though I'm a Catholic priest, I don't try to come at this from anything other than a kind of a reporting of what I've experienced.
I think that's one reason your books are so good, because you are a very good reporter, and nothing. You're very unflappable too. Nothing seems to upset you or make you uncomfortable about things. I think I'd be too excitable to do what you do. I couldn't do it.
I'm sometimes told that people have to look for a pulse, that I'm pretty calm.
But that's what it takes, I think, to do what you do. I really do, because they need that calmness. They need that strength.
They do. All of the people that I and my partners deal with have been traumatized. Yep. By the time they get to us, they're not in the height of it, but then some of them have been in a trauma loop similar to what happens to people in PTSD.
Yes.
They haven't been on a battlefield in years, but they relive it.
Oh, yes.
And a lot of people who've been murdered, or who, especially people that saw something that could kill them, that did kill them.
Oh, yeah.
That they saw the 18-wheeler cross the center line before the head-on collision. And, and so they have a flash of terror and then somehow stay in it. And those need to move through that. And of course, I don't get them at the front end. That's what I mean. There's been a healthcare system that precedes me and my partners. But when they do get to the threshold of where they are able to leave that enough, those people usually are taught how to leave the trauma loop for a little while, like to take a break from it.
Yes, really good.
And then go back to it if they need to. If they feel like that you just have to do that, well, can you stop for just a minute? We'll do this other thing. And if you need to go back to that, well, then okay.
Wow.
But then you kind of learn that it really, there is some volition. It doesn't have to be like an addiction. You really do have the ability to choose to not be thinking that.
Now, for people who have had a loved one die in an accident, a couple things you should know. Number one, an accident can be a planned exit point, which means that, the guides will be right there, loved ones will be right there. They'll be easily conveyed to the next level, and they won't have to go through any of this. It's only the true accidents, which we are told are more rare, that can end this way. But it's also people who die on a deathbed and feel really guilty about something can also decide that they just don't want to face God right now. And it's always optional. Your loved ones will try to take you home right away, but you don't have to go home. So if you have a loved one who died in an accident, just be aware that even if they didn't go right home, what we're talking about today is a process that everybody who dies this way has an opportunity to be cared for. It may not be Father Nathan who eventually helps them go the last part of the way. It may be one of the people Bruce Moen has trained in the Explorers program. There are a lot of people who do this rescue work. And people have heard of Ian Stevenson. Dr. Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia did some research on reincarnation of the very specific case of people who had a traumatic death. Usually they were murdered or really, really bad. And those people were so traumatized, they didn't go anywhere. And they eventually, apparently, just entered a pregnant woman and went into the fetus and had another lifetime. That's not normal reincarnation. But I've looked extensively at his work because it's fascinating. And that seems to be yet another way that people's life can go on, even if they kind of get totally off track. So life goes on. Your loved ones are fine, and they're going to go. Eventually, you'll see them in the next level. But
yes, and you're not in charge of their next thing. Sometimes I get
what a very important point that is. Say it again.
You're not in charge of what happens next to your loved ones.
That's true.
Sometimes people feel guilty about the way that their loved one died or what did or didn't happen, or they'll have some sort of dream visitation or some experience that might feel ghost-like or something. They'll have some psychological contact thing, and but it's vague, and then they're worried that Mama isn't at peace, and it must be I didn't make my bed, or it can be anything. I don't know. They sometimes, and then they'll kind of contact me with worry, like help me because my mother's not at rest, and I need to somehow get her to rest. And when I deal with that, I just try to listen and calm people down, and just say, she'll hear you if you pray to her, but take a deep breath. This isn't your responsibility. You're one life to the customer, at least one at a time.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Let's talk about the suicides. You single out two specific suicide victims in your book, in the second book, and this is a question I get often, and you may as well. He killed himself. Is he okay? How could he be okay? God would be mad at him. He killed himself. Those suicide victims were not judged at all. To talk about B. I mean, poor B. She had a horrible life.
Yeah,
and
B
she
is a sweetheart. If your audience can imagine old movies or newsreels or something of the big band era, where there would be a female lead singer, and then all the boys in the band were, playing clarinets and horns and so on. She was recruited at 18 off the farm, and she was brought in and thought worthy of being moved along in this kind of a chain of people that were finding, talent. And she was put into this group, and at first they only did really things close to her home, and then they began to go further away such that overnight stays were involved. They had her put up with dorm mothers or, some matronly woman running a board and care place or something. Anyway, eventually she was in hotel rooms, and she found that the guys in the band had keys to her room, and just came themselves to her. She'd never had sex, and didn't know really hardly anything about it until she was just kind of passed around, and she just found that if she just submitted, it was over faster and they would leave.
Yeah.
And the next morning she would just try to pretend nothing had ever happened until she turned up pregnant. And she couldn't have had any idea by whom. And then she didn't even want to ask any woman that had actually had a baby. She just decided she needed to end things before she showed.
Yes.
And there were guns around, and I asked her, I said, what language do you use to describe suicide? And she said, nobody's ever asked me that. And I said, well, she said, I took matters into my own hands.
Yeah.
That was her phrase.
That was the only way out. Oh my goodness. No, you're right. She was very, very touching, it was hard not to feel very tremendous sympathy. She never had a chance in life, but she was not judged. I mean, here's this woman who could very well have thought, oh, God never doesn't want me now. I mean, I've been passed around, and I felt I had to do it because otherwise I couldn't be in the band, and my family didn't want me back. And I mean, she's just a massive sort of guilt and remorse about everything, and then she kills herself. God doesn't want me now. Oh, yes, God does. God loves you infinitely, no matter what you've done.
Well, she didn't want any part of being in a book if I was going to shame her religiously.
Oh, yes.
But I wouldn't have, that's the last thing in the world I'd want to do.
No.
She said to me, do you, I always ask permission of these people if I'm going to use their story publicly.
Yes.
Many of them never are public. I just store them on my computer, on the hard drive. I take recordings and I clean them up. I edit them a little bit and store them. And I think this is interesting enough that maybe somebody along the line will want to study it, and I'll have it all ready for some research assistant.
You're very meticulous, I have to say. No, it is wonderful that you have taken such good care to preserve this record, because, yes, I'm sure in future days there will be people who will want to do more research.
Well, I'm trying to leave a good trail.
It's so beautifully already. That's what I love. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm just excited about what you're doing.
If there ever were somebody, I haven't yet been involved with the Monroe Institute or any of the centers of study at universities that are doing consciousness studies. And it might be that in the last year, COVID, put another pause year in there. But I'm hoping. I'm only 65. Maybe I'm around here quite a while longer. I don't know. But if I am, I'd like to be working with people researching consciousness, and I'm going to have a body of material to bring to the table.
Big time. Yes. Very well done. We're coming toward the end of our time. What do you want people to take away from today? People who are listening to us, what do you hope they take away and remember?
Well, there are both things to know about the afterlife, and then it's also a mystery. And we don't need to sleuth out every last detail of everything. And if you get involved in this area of study, you'll be around a lot of people who understand and believe things differently than you do. But you just listen respectfully to what they have to say. And if you're called upon, like you've called upon me today, when it's time to speak your piece, say what you have to say.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And then another is that, love is the big thing here and hereafter. Do everything you can to love enemies, pray for your persecutors.
Yes.
Your peace with all people. The universal tradition that's underneath good religion, whatever the religion, of loving one another is critical, and love doesn't die. It really doesn't.
Love doesn't die, and neither do we.
No,
it's impossible to die. Someone I counseled for a little while, years ago, who was a son of a friend, and said that he really thought he wanted to kill himself. I told her, take him to someplace else. I'm not a counselor. She said he wants to talk to you. What I said to him was, I'll tell you the only problem with killing yourself. Yeah, it seems appealing on the outside, but you can't kill your mind. You actually are more alive even because you can't kill your mind. You're more alive almost after you kill yourself than before. But you can't fix anything because you can make amends to people. As you say, people want to apologize. They want to make amends. They want to fix things. You can do that now that you're in a body. When you're not in a body, you can't even do that. So the only way you can make your situation worse is by killing yourself. But the beauty is, if you do that, God still loves you. God loves you no matter what. And Nathan, you are doing such a wonderful job for people. Bless you, sir. I should say your website is nathan-castle.com. It'll be in the notes to the program too. Yeah. But please consider yourself hugged, my dear. It has to be a virtual hug because of COVID. But I am so glad to know you. What you're doing is so beautiful.
Maybe in the year ahead we actually meet.
That would be very nice. Well, as you know,
in Metro Austin, don't you?
Yes, in Austin. Yeah. Why? Come to Austin. I would love it. Oh, that would be great. I would love to visit.
Yeah.
So, but meanwhile, everyone, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Don't you just love this? I just love what I do. This is. I should have to pay a lot of money to do this, and actually, I don't. It's like free. I get to have these wonderful experiences with people like you, Father. Beautiful experiences.
Likewise. It was a joy to be with you again.
This has been Seek Reality, and I am so glad we're with you as well. Everyone listening, please consider yourself hugged too, because we are all in this together, and what we're in is truly beautiful. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began and you never will end. And when you really get what it means to be able to say that, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be the amazing Sandra Champlain, who will be with us for the 10th time. I've known Sandra for something like 8 years now. She first contacted me when her book had just come out. It's called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And we had dinner in the Boston area. And what a lovely person I thought she was even then. And she has flown since then. She has done so much. I've done all this research and then written books. She wrote this book out because she wasn't satisfied reading other people's, experiences. She wanted to experience everything, and she still does. So she learned how to be a medium. She learned instrumental transcommunication. She learned all of that because she was devastated at the death of her cherished father, and she had to know he was okay, and she convinced herself, of course he is, just as everyone we have ever loved who has gone ahead is okay, is just fine. And then she went ahead and started really teaching all of this. She's a generation younger than I am, and I consider her to be my successor. There's no one else I would want to carry on this work as much as I want Sandra to do it. And because of COVID, her sort of day job has kind of gone away, and now she's doing this work full time. And every time I contact her, she's full of ideas and things she's doing. And so next week, she's going to kind of give us a catch-up on what's new in her life. Please join us. If you know Sandra at all, you know she's a dynamo, and she has exciting things to share. So please be sure to join us next week. And this week, we've been speaking with the wonderful Father Nathan Castle. He's been our Seek Reality guest for the 3rd time, but he'll be back. I hope he does another book soon, but he'll be back anyway. You may have noticed that some of our guests come back repeatedly, and in each of these cases, it's because we've found someone wonderful who has the special skills, special knowledge, expertise in some area that many of our listeners are eager for, and they can sell it well. As you can hear listening to Father Nathan, this is not his first time talking about all of this. He's very skilled at this. So I just like listening to him, frankly. He will be back. He'll be on again in another 6 months or 9 months or whatever. He and I will talk about that. My husband is the most Catholic person almost on the face of the earth. As you can imagine, that's a little strange for him being married to me. But he loved Father Nathan's first book, and now he has Father Nathan's second book on his lamp table. So there are areas where people can, even if we're very different, on very different spiritual paths, we can come together. And Father Nathan also does that for us, which is a wonderful thing. His books are both called Afterlife Interrupted, Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over, except for the second book, it's Helping Souls Cross Over. And he believes, and I think this is probably true, that everybody finds some way to get rescued and go home. There is so much love and care given to each of us when we're out of our bodies, if we are at all, off track, that all of us are going to get to go home. He's been doing this work for more than 20 years, and he's only 65. I hope he does it for another 25 at least, because there is a tremendous need for it. And Bruce Moen said he wanted me to do it all day and night after he taught me to do it. I've never done it since. I have other things I've got to do. But there really is a tremendous need, and it's beautiful that he's doing this so well. I have to say, too, and I'll say this again, I'm astonished that the Catholic superiors not only allow this, but encourage it. So it has, frankly, changed my whole opinion about Catholicism, which I have been cranky with love-hate relationship a little bit. Now I just think it's wonderful that they're encouraging Father Nathan to do this amazing, beautiful work. This is where Catholicism is heading, and it's glorious. When you read Father Nathan's books, I just want you to know, I've been researching this all my life. Everything in them is real. None of this is anything but real, and I think that's very important too. My own nonfiction books are, of course, Liberating Jesus, My Thomas, The Fun of Dying, The Fun of Staying in Touch, The Fun of Growing Forever, The Fun of Living Together, and soon The Fun of Loving Jesus, Embracing the Christianity that Jesus taught. For young children, there's The Fun of Meeting Jesus, which is a beautiful picture book, and it's totally unreligious. It's not related to any religion. It's just frankly, the Lord teaching our children to love one another and to the fact that they are so perfectly loved. You can find all these books either in bookstores or on Amazon, and of course the adult books are also available as audiobooks. If you ever want to contact me about anything, just go to the green contact block on robertagrimes.com. Send me an email. I will answer your email. Now I think 4 days behind or something, but I periodically will catch up. And so if it takes a few days before you hear from me, if it's a week, send me another one. It just means that you have the right email address for you, because I do answer every email. Meanwhile, we've come to the end of our time, and this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in our one great reality, where God is the very air we breathe, even though we're not aware of it, and our lives are eternal. Please always know every moment that you are powerful, you are an eternal being, and you in particular are infinitely loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.